You're listening to Coangler's Garage. With us today, we've got Dave Zavvar, one of the most consistent co-anglers on the West Coast, with 4 top 10s in his last 8 Toyota Series events. Dave drops a lot of wisdom on today's episode. Stick around. I know you'll enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to Coangler's Garage. I'm Matt MLF. Today, we've got one that I'm confident is going to be a really special one. Thrilled to have somebody I've known for a while on the show. He's been fishing great the last few years. As an example, in MLF, over a 3-year span from 2022 to 2024, he fished a total of 8 Toyota Series Western Division events and finished in the top 10 in 4 of them. And to be honest, if you were to get rid of Lake Havasu, it would have been top 10 in 4 out of 5 events, which is not too shabby. So anyway, I'm thrilled to have Dave Zavvar here today. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm thrilled to be here too.
Awesome. So, with most folks, we start out by asking a little bit about how they first got interested in fishing and ultimately found their way to this co-angling journey.
Yeah. So for me, as a child, growing up, it was a pastime mostly, but I grew up like probably most people. You start trout fishing. Your parents take you. You want to go fishing. Your parents take you to the local reservoir. I grew up in the kind of La Miranda area. There's a reservoir there called Lafayette Reservoir, and there's one called San Pablo Reservoir. But yeah, we'd go trout fishing, and that's what got it started. And then, one day when you see a big bass trying to eat your trout, you kind of wonder, maybe I should be fishing for that fish. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
can I break in for just 1 sec?
Yeah.
For those on the other side of the country, La Miranda area is in Northern California, in the eastern part of the Bay Area. And Dave, I can't remember whether we talked about this, but this is actually something we share in common because my dad's parents, my paternal grandparents, lived in the East Bay, and I used to go trout fishing at Lafayette Reservoir and San Pablo Dam every once in a while when I would come up to visit them. This was probably about a decade or so before you were there, but I'm super familiar with both of those lakes.
So yeah, same stomping ground, so to speak.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got started, and slowly had friends in that area that bass fished, and we hit the local ponds, we hit golf ponds, you name it, places we weren't probably supposed to be fishing, but that really spurred the whole interest in the sport.
And then when did you fish your first tournament?
First tournament, it's funny. Yeah, that's a great question. So it all, it started, I met somebody at a bank job. I work for a bank, but at the time they said, "Oh, you bass fish?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to." They said, "There's a bass club that I know my neighbor is in." So I started in a bass club, and I want to kind of highlight that. I think it's really important for folks to do that. To get your feet wet and just to understand the mechanics, the basics, logistics of bass fishing a tournament. But yeah, that's where I started. About 2008 was when my first tournament was for a bass club.
Nice. And so in that club environment, sometimes they run tournaments where, half the guys have boats and half don't, and it's a random draw. In others, I think it's set up as kind of a team tournament where you fish with somebody repeatedly in a few clubs. What was your club like?
So it was pro and co. So they had the backseaters and then they had the pros.
Yeah. Okay. And then how about like the first major pro-am? How long did it take you to take that leap?
That was probably a good number of years, and from the bass club, which I've stayed with for a few years. After that, I actually moved away down south, the southern part of California, for work, and so I kind of lost touch really at that time. Busy with work and immersed with kind of evolving my career and expanding that. But when I came back, it was about 20. When I was down there, I got the itch. So about 2015, 2014, 2013, right around there. 2014, 2015, I started jumping in.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we're a couple of folks who I think plan on fishing from the back deck for a while here to come. Perhaps one or both of us at some point might consider the pointy end, but I think we're both super interested in, and also busy with career, family, other things. And there's a lot of nice things about being able to fish as a co-angler. Somebody else has to find the fish, and we're grateful for it.
Absolutely.
But and it's great if we can show up a couple days early to practice, but you can't always do that. And I know you feel strongly about this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you view the co-angling opportunity.
Yeah, I do. I think it's fantastic. I think a lot of folks really shouldn't, be worried or intimidated for joining as a co-angler. Not that they are. I'm just saying that it gives you a great opportunity, honestly, for me personally, to go and compete at a high level, with limited kind of investment, with limited time investment is really what I'm talking about. I have to work like everyone else, but I can't take, then these tournaments are fun. You want to join every single one, but I can't take, 3, 4 days off to practice and then another, that week is gone for work, and just it's a demanding job. So I like it because you can literally walk right up and fish, right? I mean, if you know the body of water just enough, you talk to your pro right before the tournament. Once you get paired up, and just for general basics of what they're doing, right? You can jump in and hit the ground running. So I just like that it's the competitive atmosphere is there. You're fishing against the best, and there's so much flexibility, and that's what's attractive to me. It's just the ability to just jump in, fish, and really not have to worry about, hey man, did I get enough, time on the water, which is certainly very important. You could do that. I do that on the weekends, when it's, on limits, not off limits, but certainly you still need to do that. It's just that it's just so flexible. You don't have to, right? I've done tournaments where I didn't get a day of practice, right? And it's not recommended, but
Yeah.
certainly that's why I like it. And it is, sometimes seen as like, oh, it's just a beginner in the back seat. I know some guys see it that way. It's not. I don't want anybody to think that way. I think in some cases that's true, right? But to your point, right? I think I'll be fishing as a pro probably, I don't, for the foreseeable future, right?
Yeah.
It's just fits my schedule. It's competitive, as I mentioned. It's flexible for me. I think it's not just for beginners. I love what you're doing because I think it'll kind of focus on the competitive aspect of co-angling, and I want it to get more competitive, right? I mean, it's already heck of a job. It's hard back there,
Yeah.
right? And there's really really good sticks out there. So hats off to everybody I fish against. It's always very tough, competition, but love to see it get even tougher, and I love to see more people trying to enter as a co. And I love that what you're doing is, putting the voice out there and letting people know that it's doable with family, with kids, with jobs, all that. So that's what's attractive to me. It's just the flexibility and the competitive atmosphere that comes with it.
Yeah. Awesome. So hopefully we'll be able to attract a few more, both here on the West Coast and elsewhere. And the other goal is to try to help us all become better anglers. I think there's a lot of guys who are really strong from the back deck, but the thing that's so fascinating about it to me is no matter how strong you get in one particular technique, there's always something you can learn, whether it be from other co-anglers or watching the guy in the front of the boat. There's something you learn even on the really bad days, as well. And oftentimes those are the days you learn the most. And it triggers a desire to figure that situation out the next time. So we actually met when you had a brief stint in the front of the boat.
Funny enough, yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
strangely enough. So I think it might have been, I don't know, 2019 ish or something like that.
Yeah.
And I drew you on, I think it was day two of a Wild West Bass Trail RIP tournament at Lake Shasta. And, I don't think we smashed them that day, but and I remember it being pretty windy, but I had a good time, and we've stayed in touch, and seen each other at tournaments ever since. My most probably memorable experience with you was at Shasta, when I was feeling really good. We just idled to weigh in, and it was on day two of that tournament. And I had a 465 spotted bass in the bag. was feeling really good about myself. And your pro idles on by, you're in the back. And I remember I said something like, hey, Dave, how'd it go? And your pro had kind of a shit eating grin on his face and didn't say anything. And you kind of sandbagged a little bit and you're like, it was a pretty good day. And then we get to the weigh-in line and Dave's two people in front of me and he whips out a 6-pound spot, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
It was, yeah, 613. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty good spot in most parts of the
So is the
country.
465. I mean, that's Shasta. Those are
Yeah.
behemoths, spotopotamus.
Yeah, totally. But not when I come through the weigh-in line behind you.
Right. No, yeah,
So that was funny. How maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience because I
yeah.
think most people would be curious about a 6-pound spot.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a cool story because in that tournament, on that day, right, it was 3-day tournament. So day 2, I was actually in 53rd place after day 1. So at Shasta, right, in January, weights are pretty consistent across the board there, right? I mean, you have to have a big fish, but when you're in 53rd, you more than have to have a big fish, right? So it was just one of those situations where fishing, this is one of the things that fishing does. It keeps you coming back, right? Whether, like you said, you learn something new or you want to go try something new that you did learn, or you missed that fish that you want to go try to catch, or whatever the case is, right? Or you didn't do as well as you thought you should have, so you're going to go try it again. In this case, I mean, I was in 53rd third place, and weigh-ins were, I think, were 320 that day. It was 245. And I caught that fish, right? And before I caught that fish, I was thinking, well, I guess I'm going to drive home tonight. I don't know. I have the hotel room. Maybe I'll just leave in the morning and, take it easy. One of those thoughts. But then I thought, stop thinking that way. Just keep fishing, right? Keep your line wet, right? It's a contact sport. You have to keep contact with the water. It really is. Of course, an element of luck is always involved. And in that case, sure, there was some of that, but I think it was just the mentality. And I just was like, I got to keep fishing. I know there's 20 minutes left or, before we take off back to weigh-ins. And lo and behold, man, I was jigging. Hey, where'd my line go? And I knew, I'm like, when your line takes off that quick and it disappears like it fell off a ledge, it's probably a
Yeah.
decent fish. It's coming towards the boat, deeper water.
Yeah.
It's usually the bigger one's taken and you don't feel a thing, and it's already at the boat. And so I caught up to it, set the hook, and it was like, oh yeah, it's one of those. So, high fived like heck. It took a while to get that fish in on 6-pound test, but we high fived, and it's just the feeling and that memory. I mean, that'll never fade. That's one of the things I love about tournament fishing is I do post most of my, if not all of my memories and my results on Instagram, and I do that intentionally because it's really just for me. I want to look back and say, oh yeah, I remember that tournament, and that one didn't go that well, or that tournament was great. But in that scenario, I have those pictures and I have that memory with or without Instagram. But I do have that, and it was just a feeling that I can feel to this day. I mean, it was such a fun fish to catch.
Yeah. That's awesome. So yours was almost at the very end of the day. Mine was on my third cast.
Okay.
That 465. So it was in the live well the whole day.
Yeah, the ups and downs, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're in cloud 9 at 9:45, right?
Yeah. In our case, it was on a main lake structure spot basically, and I had like a little window to where there was a drop off,
Mhm.
and I figured, and I could see it on the map, so I knew what I was dealing with, and just made several casts to that edge and caught it on a fatty Z, which is a fairly commonly used bait there that time of
Yeah,
year.
and I could
Um,
expand on that a little bit if you'd like, and I think it might
yeah,
help some
sure.
folks right listening, and kind of how that fish was positioned, and what I used. I used a Nico rig, right? A little bit of a heavier weight, um, and essentially it was later in the day. It's January, and the sun had come out and had been out for a little while. So I was really like thinking, okay, this is kind of when they might hover up a little bit, try to come and sun a little bit. This is
Mm-hmm.
when, if they're going to do that, they might want to be around some big boulders, hard, hard, maybe red clay, maybe where there's some food, right? Some crawdad holes and nests, right? And we ran into a secondary point that I was able to reach, behind the boat, cast far enough out to get to it. And it was sunny. I could tell that sun had been on that point, and it had some granite, some rock, right? And it had some of that red clay. It just had a lot of that the recipe, so to
Yeah.
speak. And
And it was fairly shallow where you were casting?
it was, I cast it in about 4 feet of water.
Yeah.
But that bank, again, access to deep water is important, right? For these fish,
Yep.
especially the big ones, right? They want to be able to get away. And so it was a pretty steep secondary point, but it was big also, and it had a lot of sun. And I could tell, man, that if there's something, 30 minutes,
Yeah.
20 minutes left, this might be it. I mean, literally, I didn't think like this is going to happen, but I thought this is a high probability spot. Let's give this a
Yeah.
shot. So that was kind of the key there, was that bank, a lot of sun, late in the day, January, don't see a lot of sun in Shasta. Usually it's freezing and
Yep.
cold and snowing. So so it,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really worked out well in that respect.
Yeah. I've had some sort of mid-afternoon, not too long before weigh-in success there as well, on shallow, like way shallow sunny banks with an eco rig, strangely enough. So yeah, that's an N of two, but it sounds like something that's worth trying there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, Shasta, right? Nico, Ned, you could throw A
yep,
rigs. I mean, back of the boat, you could do a lot,
little
right?
Kai Tech.
Jigs, of course.
Yeah, yep, totally. All right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about. So at the beginning, I was talking about this 3-year run in Toyota Series tournaments, and you fished a lot of Wild West tournaments while they existed, did well there as well. But in particular, I think of you as really having a ton of success. So I think that it was actually 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s in those 8 tournaments from 2022 to 2024. If you take out Lake Havasu, which I don't know if that's a place like you'd rather not visit again or you like going there. If you take that out, that's in only 5 tournaments. And so that's 2 top 10s on the Delta, 2 top 10s on Clear Lake. So obviously you have found a way to be super consistent at those 2 really storied bass fisheries. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what you think leads to that consistency?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really boils down to preparation. I think you definitely know that, right? It's preparation is so important. There's times where you don't get time to prepare, and it might be a lake that you don't get to fish as often, like Havasu, and,
Yeah.
and so you can bomb, right? It's just, if you're not prepared, it's not just that you haven't pre-fished; it's that your mind may not even be in the game, right? You might be thinking about work, or you might be, still thinking about babysitting kids or whatever that it's on your mind. You have to really be prepared when you're fishing. I think it's so important, at least for me personally, to clear my mind and be there in the now, right? With
Yep.
in the water at that time.
Same
This
here.
is what I'm doing, right? There's no need to think about anything else. You're on a boat, right? And you're there to fish. So I think preparation's important. Of course, to add to that, you got to spend time on the water, right? You have to know, at least to some level, kind of what 2 or 3 of your strengths might be. Whether, hey, look, I know in the morning they're going to eat the top water, or I know that they're not going to eat any top water any time of the day, right? And you think they might, but you have to know that, because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, for that example, right, you could jump on someone's boat and say, hey, they're not throwing top water, and they may not tell you, right? They may not say anything, but you could waste an hour, 2 hours. I don't know how long you're going to keep that in your hand, but that's important. That's where the preparation comes in, is to know that what you're throwing works, um, in
Yeah.
that particular time frame, right? And so I think preparation's key. Getting some time on the water, right? Finding somebody to practice with, bouncing ideas off each other if you can. Um, just basically, another really important part of it is also just kind of bolstering your pro, right? Helping them help you in some respect, and not,
Mm-hmm.
in a way where it's, crossing any lines. It's just that they are comfortable, make them comfortable. They've put more investment monetarily, right, than you have, most likely. It's their boat, right? You're
Typically
kind of a
time as well.
guest on their boat, right? You got to think of it that way. And you want them to kind of fish freely. And I think of it that way. I think etiquette's important. That does affect both of your mentalities in the positive, kind of vibration, so to speak, of the boat,
Yep.
and how the day goes. But that's important, right? You have to. I'm a big proponent of, hey, can I bring some water? Hey, can I move your net while you get, you're pulling the trolling motor up? Let me get stuff out of the way. Let me get buttoned up. My line's still not in the water. So, hey, I'm ready to go when you are, right? Let's go. And I can't wait to the next spot, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's important because mentality in any sport is an important factor. So preparation, just having the positive mentality and helping your pro help you, is really important. And then lastly, I think it's, as you know, it's important to just be kind of open minded, right? In any tournament. So you could do all that practice. You could do, hey, buddy, pat on the back to the pro, another good fish for you, right? But if you
Hmm.
don't cue in on clues, right? It's a clue game, right? It's like
Yep.
anything, if you're not paying attention and you miss one clue, it's because you weren't paying attention, but that could derail your tournament. It could derail your day. But you have to be, really vigilant, I think. And I try to be like, hey, this guy's been throwing X, Y, and Z, not really working well, right? And so I'm going to try something else, right? And I'm going to try something different, maybe a different hop, maybe a different skip, maybe a different cadence, right? But
Yep.
I'm going to try a bunch of different things. So just flexibility, time on the water, and then just have that positive outlook with your pro and help them, or help her, help that individual just be comfortable so that you can both, do as best you can.
Yep. Yeah, those are wise words, and I think that there are elements of that that have been a repeated point in several of the interviews. I think there's broad agreement amongst excellent co-anglers that it's important to get along with the guy or gal, the individual at the front of the boat, and that oftentimes, if you're a fish short of a limit at the end of the day, having good rapport oftentimes leads to an opportunity where maybe they open up a casting lane to a place where they know there's a fish, or maybe there's a bed fish that won't help them, and they'll position you to go after that fish for a few minutes. It can make all the difference. So I think those are really important points. So let's talk a little bit about Clear Lake. I will admit that there's a little bit of self-interest in this one because for whatever reason, Clear Lake has had my number as a tournament fisherman. I love the Delta, and I love fun fishing at Clear Lake. But for whatever reason, Clear Lake and I do to date have not really agreed with each other in tournaments. So and I think a lot of other people out there would be curious, given your consistency there at spring tournaments, to hear a little bit about the way you approach it. And then also, I'm wondering if maybe for those of our listeners who maybe are east of the Rockies and hear about Clear Lake, if you could start off by just describing the lake and what it's like that time of year.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for folks that maybe have never been there, Clear Lake is the largest natural lake in California, or maybe North America, but definitely California. It's kind of spread out into two sections, so to speak. You got the north side of the lake, which is kind of a bowl. It's huge. It's a big circle, shallower. And then you've got kind of mid lake and south, which is deeper, rockier. So you got two sections of that lake, but that lake is um, just hog heaven. I mean, at the end of the day, it is, I think, almost unarguably the best lake in the country. I know there's some Texas spots as well. Certainly don't want to step on any toes there, but it is a lake where you can do nearly anything to catch a bass, and you can find any technique
Yep.
at any part of the lake that may work. Of course, especially in springtime, you got a lot of fish roaming, right? You've got some that are chewing, you got some that aren't, you got some that
Yeah.
are stationary, you got some that are positioned in places they should be positioned, right? So you've got a lot, some in the tulies, you got some in the weeds. I mean, it's everywhere. Docks are a big thing in the lake there too.
Hmm.
So you got a lot of dock structure. Your lake does. So it's one of those lakes that When I think of bass fishing, and the Delta is similar in respect to what I'm going to say, is that it's wide open. You don't have to throw a 6 pound test and just fish for spots. Some lakes are like that here in
Yeah.
California and other parts, but it is wide open. I mean, you could find your bite, right? I mean, somebody may win pre-FFS. You could win, throwing a frog, and someone else could be doing just an S waiver, or someone else could just be throwing a jig down in Henderson. So
Yeah.
it's a place where I think it's so versatile, which makes that so fun for folks out there. So if you come to Clear Lake, anybody listening from the East Coast, bring everything because you can catch
Yeah.
fish on anything there.
Bass fishing Disneyland, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love that place. Everyone does. So
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's a good summary. How about for spring tournaments? More specifically,
yeah,
what's
so
your mindset typically
sure.
going into those, and how do you break it down?
I mean, springtime, of course, being in the back seat, you have to understand that you do lack some control, but overall, you do want to, first and foremost, for tournament wise, and tournament wise, you want to talk to your pro, but non-tournament wise, just going to Clear Lake and in the spring, you really want to focus on areas where fish are staging and obviously spawning, right? Like anywhere
Yeah.
else. You want to have a little bit of everything in your hand, right? You want to have chatterbait, you want to have a Senko, a jig, right? You want to have a drop shot, most certainly, maybe even a Carolina rig, something slower, even. But you want to have a good tool set, and then certainly you decide how you want to fish for those fish. If you want to fish for just fish that are up and shallow and spawning, you can do that. You can go find those fish and find areas that have more than others. But that lake does sets up a little differently. You do see fish in the spring that are up shallow, right? You can see them in 3 feet of water. But what some people probably don't realize is there's fish out deeper that you don't realize are spawning. You can't really
Yep.
see. And so blind casting from the back seat is really important in the spring. I think fan casting, if somebody, your pro, again, back to the etiquette, right? He's fishing and he's pinpointing fish, and he's fishing for 3 or 4 fish around the front of the boat, right? And you look behind the boat and go, I don't see any fish here, and man, I'm stuck. And then you go down that bummer hole, right? That mindset. You don't want to do that. That lake, there's fish out there, and if they're not spawning, there are big girls waiting, right? And
Right.
they're
Yep.
staging out there. They're suspended or whatever, right? But that lake, especially in this time of year, right? In those spots, the water's a little more shallow, so if you cast out, you're not gonna be in 25 feet of water.
Right.
And even if you are, that's not bad for you're not
Particularly
going to
in
find that
in the
depth.
north end.
Right. So,
Yeah.
that's what I would recommend, in the spring, just as a to really fan cast, be open minded. Don't think that there's only fish where the pro is fishing. Um, and learn a thing or two and be surprised, because when you cast the direction you thought there's got to be nothing out there, you might catch
Hmm.
something really big, or you might catch a
Yeah.
few that way and then see, okay, there's something going on here. So that's a pretty, I think, helpful tip. I hope it is for some folks out there, but really, just you can choose how you want to fish Clear Lake this time of year. It's just choose how you'd like to fish it. If you want to go for those pre-spawners, then you certainly want to fish out a little further, and you want to
Right.
move some baits around. So
Right. Right. For sure. Makes sense. So, let's talk about the Delta. We're both fishing the upcoming Bass Angler Magazine Pro Am there, which is at the end of this month. You live in Concord, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from the Delta. I'm also not far from there. We both spend some time there. It's going to be a fun event. Uh, the Delta is fishing tough in some ways, well in others. So, with that said, Dave, would you be willing to, orient folks who maybe have heard of the Delta but uh, live on the other side of the Rockies or somewhere else, and haven't fished there before, to some of the nuances, so the tidal element, how vast it is, how in a general sense how people like to fish there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for folks who have never been there, or maybe once or twice, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's 1,000 miles of shoreline, So it's a delta, right? It's a tributary. It's all the water that comes down from the Sierra Nevadas, Shasta, and those lakes, basically the mountains, and creates this alluvial fan and a lot of waterways, right? A lot of tributaries. It's skinny in many places. There's places that are a little bit larger waters, and there's some big water areas, but it's typically canal, right, with riprap. And to your point, it's a tidal tributary, so it's tidal water. So it's really important to kind of focus when you get to the delta on breaking down sort of where bass might be comfortable, where water moves, to maybe dead end sloughs, and waters moves into islands that have been flooded, right? Areas that have ambush areas, right? But it's really a tidal waterway. So you have to really focus on when you get there. First thing you do, you don't show up at Delta and say, "What's the tide?" You really should know what the tide is. That's the most important part, before you even get on that boat, to know how am I going to fish this place today, or the next 4 to 6 hours, right? And how am I,
Yeah.
and where am I going to go with that, right? What areas?
Yeah. Yeah. And I tend to use the NOAA site for tides. There's a few out there. I don't know if you have a favorite that you
Well, I
use,
used
but
to use Delta Boating,
NOAA
but they
works.
took the .com, they took
Yeah.
that site
They took it
down.
down.
Yeah, I don't know. So
Me too.
I just use the Windy app or the weather app. There's a couple apps out there
Yeah.
you
That
can
works
use.
too.
The Windy app's great for the wind too. The Delta can get super windy to that point. So you want to know that as well.
Yep.
Because you could struggle quite a bit with that wind. It's dangerous, right? So, but yes, those are
And the, yeah, and there might be a rod or two that if it's super windy, you don't want to have with you, or vice versa.
right.
So it might affect what you bring on any given day if it's going to be super windy. Um, cool. So you finished fourth in 2023 and a Toyota Series Derby there, and I think I fished that one. And I think I was like 13th or something like that.
Nice.
In my case, had a bit of a challenging draw on day one, and then had a lot of fun the last couple days. Fished on day two with Roy Hawk, who's followed our Instagram channel recently, which was nice.
Awesome.
He's a great guy. And then fished with Brett Lieber on day three, which was also awesome because he's a local, and that was a super fun tournament. Um, Maybe can you talk a little bit about how that one went for you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, in May, right? I mean, this one's in May. I don't remember exactly what the date was for that one, but it's
Yeah, I don't either.
I think it
Similar
was
time
very
frame.
similar time. Yeah. I fished with a few folks there. So I Brent Lieber is funny. You mentioned that I fished with him day one,
Mm-hmm.
and we ran around, and yeah, we did okay. He did pretty good. He caught 17 pounds, I think, that day. So he did really great. He's an awesome guy,
Yeah,
sponsored by QU, and
yeah,
so but a really good guy. Delta Stick, been there for years. So
yep,
hats off to Brett. Fished with him, and when some guys are really good like that, and there's again skinny water in the delta, right? You may struggle. So day one for me, and of course no reflection, only good on Brett, right? He just
yeah.
cleaned house. He's like a
He's a
vacuum up
vacuum
there.
cleaner. Yep.
I didn't do too hot, so I started off kind of with a low first day weight. It was a little struggle. I thought, shoot, let's see where this ends up. But again, it's too early after day one at a place like the Delta to make a distinction on how the tournament's going to go. So day two, got out there, fished with Hunter Schlander, who's a well-known
Yeah.
pro
Good draws.
out
Yeah.
in the Delta. I think he fishes with Christian Ostrander quite a bit, but Hunter, I fished with him, and so that was an experience, a great experience, a really good guy as well.
Yeah.
Really hospitable, really helpful, and we did great. And both of us did pretty good that day. Put him up in a really good spot, and put myself in a pretty good spot as well. I had to really focus on day two just to get fish right, and try to get a good one. Obviously, you're always trying to get a good one, but I had to tell myself you need five, right? At the very least. And sometimes in the Delta, I'm telling you, as a co, you can come back one, two fish, right? It's the time of year and it's just how it fishes
Yep.
and you're behind somebody. So depending
Yep.
on how they fish, it's not you. It's just, it could happen. You could come back with a fish 2-0, it happens. So
Yeah.
I
And there
tell
are
my,
parts of the Delta that I think lend themselves to that just have fewer fish.
yeah,
And in fact, in that particular tournament, I spent most of day one in those types of areas. And I can't even tell you how proud I was to come back with one fish.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, I might have just saved my tournament by catching one
Right.
fish.
Yeah, yeah.
It was one of those days.
It's totally
So
like that.
yeah.
It is. And,
Yep.
and so yeah, with that, I mean, it was just day two was good, and I was able to. I threw on a Senko, 5-inch Senko. I wacky rigged it, and I threw that
Yeah.
like heck, like all pretty
Yep.
much told. I thought I gotta get that bite. I don't know. It was obviously a little tough yesterday. Obviously, we know the weights are low, right? These
Yep.
bass are being a little stingy. I can sure I can throw a drop shot, but sometimes that's just a little too much, you know. And just to fall that Senko, man, that bait is an incredible bait. Hats off to Yamamoto for that. It's just that was what I did most of the day too. I got a good bag. I was able to fish behind someone that's picking away at every little detail, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and fish a little differently in some respect, right? So that was really helpful. That got me in the top 10 and set me up for day three, where I was able to open it up a little bit more and make up some ground to get to fourth. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, do you find, just out of curiosity, I think there are some people we fish with who tend to build momentum as the tournament goes on. And then there are others who, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just random and it just falls out this way. But, I think sometimes there are people who tend to have a big day one, day two, not so great. Is there a particular pattern for you in that regard, or does it seem pretty random?
day three, you're saying specifically?
Building larger bags as the tournament goes on versus starting out big and
Yeah,
then trying to hold on.
gotcha. In terms of that, I think it's partially random, but it's also depending on the lake that you're fishing or the
Yeah.
body of water, I think. For example, like they say Don Pedro or in the spring or even in late spring or Comanche or Shasta, you can hone in day by day as to kind of, and certainly you're
Yep.
learning a lot too as a co. I don't give myself credit for all this. The pros are so helpful, right? You're getting a guided trip, just you have to see it that
Yep.
way. Again, that's why etiquette's important, but really you're getting a lot of information and you have to be head on a swivel soaking that stuff up. But in that effect, you can do that, and you can increase your bag, you can increase your weight if you put those puzzle pieces together, and you can add on to what you're currently doing day after day. So it can happen depending on the body of water, right? Spotted bass lakes and lakes that have multi-species, you can adjust because there's multi-species
Yeah.
and they set up differently. But I think with the delta, it's a different animal. It really is, and you could certainly do that. Um, but it can be a little more random depending on kind of again what you are able to control, which is sometimes limited.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Agree 100% on the Delta. Draw matters significantly sometimes there.
yeah.
Uh, I think for myself, in part because I think I have a little more limited ability than some of the other co-anglers to practice either of the 2 days before a lot of the tournaments.
Mhm.
I find that my weights day by day tend to grow. And I think I agree with you 100% that on the Delta, it's pretty random. But I do think that there's, an element of, for me personally, and everybody, fish is different, trying to figure out what's going on,
Mhm.
that day one, first morning a little bit, that if I practiced, might be able to avoid that. So perhaps in the future, I'll find my way into a situation where I can practice a little bit more.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but the other thing is, I was talking to somebody the other day who made the point that once you know all of the fundamentals, practice matters less. And from their vantage point, they felt super strongly that when they have great practices, their tournaments stink.
Uh-huh.
And when they have crappy practices, their tournaments are good. So the point they were taken away from it was, I shouldn't practice. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I at the end of the day, whatever gives you, I think, confidence, right?
Yep.
Whether it's a bait, the way you think, your approach, whatever that may be, if you're confident in almost anything, you can make things work, right? So
Yeah,
I
totally.
can understand that.
Yeah. So I got another question for you about the Delta. And with all of these, talk in as much or as little detail as you like. But this one is one that over the years, I've had several co-anglers who were traveling from elsewhere, oftentimes the Pacific
Mhm.
Northwest. They'll ask about, what's in your quiver of rods you're bringing to the Delta. And they always seem to be focused on the punch rod.
Mhm.
And like, with the thought being that you're going to be punching 95% of the day. And I will tell people, at least in my experience, typically that for much of the day, with many of the people you're fishing behind, you're not within reach to punch something 95% of the day, in the sense of like, ounce and a half weight
Mhm.
going through a hyacinth canopy or whatever. So there are really other rods that are probably more important, although you won't catch me going to that tournament without a punch rod,
Right.
personally.
Agreed.
So
100%. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So maybe can you talk a little bit in general terms about your approach to what you bring with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer of don't leave any rods at home, know the rules, right? Even if you're, I mean, dialed in, right? If you know it's X, Y, and Z, just bring a couple extra rods. That's number one, right? So you don't want to end up there with what they call professional overrun, right? And then have to uh, change out the line, just grab another reel, put it on, right? But bring enough pulls, right? Even if you think you're going to punch all day, just bring an extra few pulls. Just do that because it's an insurance policy, right?
Yeah. When you first said that, I thought where you were going with it was the different tournament organizations have different
They do.
rules, and BAM actually allows 8
Eight,
rods,
right?
which is, for me personally, if I were to take 8 in the boat, even though I try to be really meticulous about
It
organization,
gets,
I think 8 would be crazy. I think seven's the limit for me.
yeah,
But do you feel like you would actually go all the way up to the limit
I
potentially?
do. I would, yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
what I do is I'll take kind of maybe when we get to a spot that I understand how we're going to fish it or what it looks like and how I'm going to fish
Yeah.
it. I'll pull 3 or 4 poles out of that 8 and put them on top, and I'll separate them out and make them easy to grab instead
Yeah.
of scrambling in the middle and trying to do that and getting stuck and frustrated and doing that. So I set it up. As soon as we get to a spot, life jacket off, fix up, look around. What am I going to be throwing? Maybe, right? Put this ankle pole up, put the punch pole up, put it all ready,
Yeah.
get the line ready, make sure it's not tangled. So I do that almost all the time is so I'm not dealing with that and I'm saving some time in the
It's
long run.
also nice, or it's considerate, because you're not like 10 minutes later when your pro spots a 4 pounder cruising in front of them. You're not making a bunch of noise trying to dig your drop shot rod out of the
Exactly.
bottom left of that stack of rods.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, exactly. And you're not, um, screaming profanities, but
Yeah.
you're doing all right back there, right? But my point is, I like to keep it clean and know that yes, 8 poles, but I know I'm probably not going to touch that pole till, for example, the delta till the tide comes up at 2 o'clock or whatever, right? So that's going to be at the bottom, or the frog pole. It's going to be right on top most of the time, especially in this time of year. So to your question about kind of what do I have, and those 4 or 5 poles at least in my quiver, so to speak, is definitely a punch pole. We talked about that, right?
Yep.
And that weight on that punch pole is dependent on your practice, right?
Yep.
I don't know what weight until I go and see what they eat, and it could change during the day. And so with that, I'll have a flipping pole, right? So the punch
Y-
pole may have 1.5, 1.25, maybe 2 ounces.
Yep. Yep.
And I've got to get that semi dialed in. You can always thumb it a
Yeah.
little too, right?
Yeah. And maybe it's worth saying that, although I agree with you 100% that the weight, you might change based on whether they want something that's fallen a little faster or not. A lot of that, though, with the weight is what vegetation you're punching and whether you can get it through. Because oftentimes a good rule of thumb is whatever's the lightest weight that you can consistently get through and efficiently fish. So there is the, what's the optimal weight for rate of fall, but then there's also, if you've got a 1 1/4 tied on and your pro has taken you to a part of the delta where, I don't know, it's penny ward or something, and it's a little more difficult, yeah, or not to get through, you may want to
The weight,
adjust.
yeah, the weight's too light,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I try to do like a pretty, dial that heavy weight in, right?
Yep.
And of course, certainly want to get it through the vegetation. But you also kind of want to know what that rate of fall is a day like, right? For that particular day, half day, 4 hours or 3 hours, it changes, right, all the time. But sometimes it'll stay consistent for through the tournament. But that, and then 0.75 or half ounce weight that I'll use for flipping,
Yeah.
with maybe same deal, brush hog or speed craw or whatever, right? That I'm going to
Yeah.
flip, missile baits, D-bomb, right?
Yep.
Whatever that is. Even a baby brush hog sometimes, just whatever with that weight. So I have two different weights, and to your point, lighter weight for that, less, thick vegetation, and then for, deep high hydrilla, that, or not hydrilla, but hyacinth, that you got to jump through. Yeah, you might have to have that 2 ounce on there, and get that through. But you can also thumb it if you gets through and they don't like that fast fall. You can slow it down a little bit. So you have some versatility there.
Yeah.
And then the other couple polls definitely, is, for the Delta in May, specifically for folks that might be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, is definitely a drop shot. It's no secret, right? But you want that because it's not a small fish lure, not here in the Delta.
It's both.
What's that?
Numbers and
Yeah, you get both.
right.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, just be prepared for, probably no less than 12-pound test on that. Maybe tie it up to some braid if you're around some vegetation, right? So that you can cut through that vegetation if it's a big roll.
It,
Um,
yeah. That, can I ask a question about that?
yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. I do the same thing. It sounds like we use similar pound test. I am aware of other co-anglers though who have gone much lighter, both with that and with, say the 5 inch Senko long cast kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It sounds like you mostly come from the school of thought that many do, that in general in the Delta, you're fishing for potentially for big fish. You don't want to lose that one when you hook it. And so light line most of the time doesn't play a role. Is that your perspective?
I'm sorry. Run that by me
Uh,
again. I kind of missed the end there.
so how do you believe that light line and coffee grinders don't belong on the Delta, or do you feel like there's a role for them?
I don't think well, light line is relative, right? So, uh, I would say, to answer that high level, it doesn't really belong there.
Yeah.
But light line there, I think, in my experience, I just don't go below 12.
Yeah.
Now, even if I'm in, pretty clear water, and that happens certainly, um, it depends, I guess, what type of vegetation's around or structure. And the way I think of it is, if I'm fishing in an area where, and hopefully there are big fish, but sometimes, where there's big fish areas, and you may know from practice, or the guy might tell you, the pro might tell you, you can't afford to set that hook, do everything right, and then have that fish just run off, and you're on 8-pound test, right, into the weeds. It's over. I mean, it's your
Yeah.
chances are slim at that point to get that fish out. So I'd rather not have that happen. I still think they will bite, and they do. They really do.
Yeah.
And water clarity is a big factor. It's just that you're not going to find, and depending on where you're on a delta, in May, with a lot of wind, the wind does kick up and the water gets a little muddy. You're fine. You're fine. You can throw 12, 15, or more, no problem,
Yeah.
even on like a drop shot or Senko. So yes, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I don't go below 12. I just don't.
Yeah. We're in the same boat on that, but I think, there are some people who philosophically believe in
Yeah,
getting the bite first and go the other direction. But I'm always worried about losing fish if I think about doing that.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's just when you get the bite, and sometimes it's hard to get the bite, and so I don't want that fish going anywhere. If he another thing I think is a good tip, is these big fish will go and they'll bury themselves, right? Everybody knows that they'll bury themselves
yeah,
in the grass. Doesn't mean it's over. It just doesn't. A lot of folks will go, oh, keep tension on it, which is good. But I've learned, interesting enough, is just wait. Keep the tension and wait. And sometimes they will eventually swim back out and you can get them. And you got to wait sometimes 5 minutes, maybe more. As long as you keep that line
yeah,
tight, that fish will go, forgot, and I'm going to come back out. And then you can go in and net them or grab them, whatever you need to do. But without that line being, strong enough, it's just you're dead in the water. It's tough. So it
yeah,
hurts to lose those big ones. And so for
yeah,
me, I'd rather get two or one big bite fish and try to get it in the boat than five or six or seven 13-inch, 15-inch,
yeah,
2 pounders, right? It just not, those are
yeah.
not going to do it for you.
Yep. So when I was a kid growing up in San Diego, I used to do more saltwater fishing back then, and sometimes you'd hang a good fish and it would get wrapped up in the kelp if you're fishing inshore. And back then, oftentimes you might end up in a situation where you have to actually give it a little bit of slack to try to get it out. Sounds like that's not your approach on the Delta, which is not mine typically either. But
Yeah, well, if you give it
you like
slack
to,
and the fish
yeah,
swims out, then your line could get caught going the opposite direction and pull the hook out. So,
yep,
yeah, it'll just give them opportunity that the hook to come out of their mouth. That's the way I see it. So if they swim out, your line's not tight. You want that line to cut
yeah,
through the grass, and you want it to have connection to the mouth and just stay there.
yeah,
So that's just
yeah,
my
yeah.
my thing. But, yeah.
Makes sense. Um, all right, so here's a question for you. I think this is general enough that it'll be palatable. So, over the years of fishing the Delta from the back seat in derbies, if you split your fish catches into four buckets, uh, top water, moving baits like a chatterbait or a square bill or whatever, that non-top water moving baits, reaction baits, uh, punching, and other plastics, non-punching. What percentage of fish would you say have come from those buckets in derbies over the years?
Oh, it's a good question. I would say it's about 30-70. I'd say for the back seat, 70% finesse,
Okay.
70% finesse, right? I think
Okay.
30% of my fish probably come the other way.
So so that's with and by when you say finesse, punching is not in that bucket. Is that right?
Well, non-reaction.
Or
Let's say non-reaction.
okay.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. So reaction versus non-reaction. That's how I guess I would quote it. But
Yeah.
yeah, 30% reaction.
All right. Fair enough.
But you
All
asked
right.
what four categories there, right? You said
I
hot
did. I
water. I'm
did.
happy to
You're
answer
kind of
all those.
skirting this one a little bit. Oh, if you are,
Yeah,
okay.
let's
So
run them
let's
back.
let's
Yeah,
let's
sorry.
dive into details a little bit. So, what fraction would you say we're punching? And by punching, let me clarify. Like that could be either big hyacinth mat with bombing an ounce and a half through there, or it could be sending a 3/4 ounce through some submerged vegetation that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, I would say it's. So, are we talking about just the delta?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say overall for all the derbies, yeah, I'd say about 10 to 15% on the punch.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
low. It's low, and sadly it is. But because I'll explain why. There isn't a lot of punching water often, and when there is, you're pro. And if he's doing that,
Precisely.
they're gonna get it. Doesn't mean you're not gonna catch them behind him. It's just your chances are a lot lower. But yeah, it's a 10 to 15 for punching. What were the other categories?
So then, how about, so moving baits? You basically got top water and submerged stuff like chatterbaits, squarebills.
Yeah,
So for those two categories,
they're up there. Topwater and moving baits in the Delta Derby, specifically, kind of this time of year. It's up there. I'd say it's probably in the 40% range.
combined.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
Okay.
up, maybe 40-50%. I mean, it's nearly half. Nearly half. So just below that.
So just below half of all your fish.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the chatterbait's a big
Okay.
player. Look,
Okay. So then you may have to revise the 70-30 a little bit
well,
then,
yeah, that was just
right?
for totally. That
Yeah.
was just for reaction,
Okay.
non-reaction. But yes, if we're gonna break it down to
Yeah.
these
Got it.
categories, certainly, the chatterbait's a big player in the Delta.
Yeah.
And everybody
Yep.
knows that. So that is
Yep.
something like, you don't. Certain lakes you just don't go to and not throw, let's say, Morning Dawn at Berryessa or whatever, right? There's
Mm.
certain things you don't do, or you go to lakes and you got to do because that lake just loves that, right?
Yep.
Um, and Chatterbait's one of them in the Delta, so it's a big player. So it's up there. Top water too. It's probably about percent to 30, so 20, 30, 40, and then the 10, right? And then some finesse. The finesse is in there as well, but
Yeah.
it's not even. It's just, I would say, I'd break it down to finesse. Let's put it this way: finesse and the chatterbait, moving baits are about equal. So let's say they're 40
Yeah.
40, and then let's go 10 10 10. That's probably what I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. I think honestly, for me, I'm in a pretty similar ballpark within, 5 or 10% on all of those. I agree with you 100% that for Delta derbies this time of year, with some of the fish being post spawn, top water often plays a role. And I think honestly, I don't throw it that much, but I kind of pick my spots. And it makes me wonder whether I ought to throw it more.
Yeah,
And I don't know because I haven't tried it, but
yeah,
that's one of those things that I just wonder whether maybe I should do it a little bit more. But it really is kind of like you were talking about with that big spotted bass at Shasta. There are just some places and situations that beg for it.
yeah,
And I'm guessing you may be kind of the same way where
definitely.
you grab that rod when there's a good target or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Is that, yeah,
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that's in my approach. It's fish what's in front of you. I think that's kind of my theme. My
yeah,
my approach is with a delta is fish what's in front of you. I think that's like paramount, right? It's fish what's in front of you. Don't get stuck. Chatterbait's great. Don't get stuck with it, right? Don't get stuck punching and just waiting for the next with 100 yards down as another
yeah,
hyacinth pad. Don't wait there, right? Fish what's in front of you is the number one tip I could probably give for the Delta. And
yeah,
so that, to your point, yes. So the frog, it's a big, huge player. I mean, May already today, it's warm out. I mean, in 25 days when the tournament kicks off for BAM, Bass Angler Magazine's tournament, I'm looking forward to it. I think the frog is going to be huge. If you don't have that ready, but you cannot throw it everywhere. You shouldn't. Maybe you can, but you shouldn't. In my humble opinion, I'm looking for those high concentration areas where certainly, again, back to the etiquette thing, where if I think the pro might be going there, I'm going to ask them, hey, are you going that
right,
way? Do you mind if I cast there? Is that okay? And they'll tell me yes or no, or have at it. Or they'll tell me
yeah,
cast anywhere you want. And I love that answer. But,
yeah,
I always ask, but it's like I'm looking for a spot, like for example, for the frog is it's just a spot that's very froggy. It's warmer out or whatever. It could be in the morning even. It doesn't matter. But just an area where maybe there's some fry garters, right? They're going to eat a frog. A place where there's a mat and it opens up and there's a little current running by it. You can throw that
Yep.
up against the mat. Maybe there's some
Classic.
cheese
Yep.
by the end of May, and hit the top of the cheese and get them to come up and eat that. But I'm looking for that. And if it's not there, there's something else there that I can be throwing.
Yeah.
So fish what's in front of you. So if he tells me I can't do that, and I don't see another frog kind of opportunity, I'll pick up, I'll look for a weed line and I'll drop shot the weed line or throw a Senko on it, right? I may start flipping the grass in front of me. Even if you think there's no fish there, you gotta flip. Thinking there's no fish there is an absolute error, right? I mean, you can't
Yep.
see them. Sometimes you can, but really they're there, and they may not be. But I'm
And you
saying
gotta you
they're
gotta
there.
find
You
out.
gotta flip. You gotta flip. You gotta cast. You gotta
Yep.
keep your line wet. As I said, it's a contact sport. But I'm always looking for the next best opportunity, right? The high concentration spots in the delta gives you a lot of variation in that. So that's what I'm doing. And so those 4 poles that I have ready, that's been decided when I get to a spot like, yeah, there comes some frog water here. Yeah, there's a little bit of drop shot. Yeah, I could even throw, a little Nico rig in here in some areas, right? And so that's how I approach it, and I just wait and wait for the good water, so to speak.
Yeah. Awesome. So there's a pretty healthy subset of pros that tend to fish the delta pretty actively with the trolling motor relatively high, trying to cover a lot of water, potentially running and gunning. And when you're in the back seat in that setting, without going into like, specific tides and more specifics around spots, I'm curious across your experience at the delta in those scenarios, do you generally fish stuff that's uh you know 90 degrees from the boat that you're just sort of going by, that the pro just ran over and or may have just fished? Or there's a school of thought from some other people, some of whom are amongst that light line group, that I think feel that long casts behind the boat to try to get away from the boat are oftentimes a great strategy. Do you tend to focus on one or the other of those?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly really just fishing kind of what the pro hasn't fished, right?
Yeah.
And a little
And watching
differently,
them.
different water column, different profile, different color. I mean, sometimes same color, different area, but um, I'm trying to find something again, another clue that can help me. So I'm doing something probably different, but not always, or something that's been working all day, and I'll just fish it a little differently. But one thing I'll do is, like you said, if in the delta, like if it's hard to cast backwards almost anywhere, right? Because especially if the boat's moving fast. So if
Yeah.
you're my recommendation there, humble recommendation is to just fish your strength. If the boat is moving fast and he's got the trolling motor on high, you want to fish your strength, what you're confident in. And if you can do that just effectively enough, I think that's probably your best bet, right? And for me, that's what I do is I'm looking for my confidence lure, and I'm looking at, can I fish it in here? And I might have multiple confidence lures, but if he's going
Yeah.
down the bank, right, and there's a trough, let's say, right, and he's just casting ahead with a chatterbait and he's running past the weed line, I'll cast in the trough with a Senko or a Nico, right? Maybe a little weight on it
Uh-huh.
so it gets down there, a drop shot, just so I can get it down, bop, 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 reel it in, cast ahead. Hey, do you mind if I'm casting about 45 degrees forward, right? Is
Yeah.
that okay to you? Because I see you casting that way. Is that going to bother you? Do you mind?
Yeah.
Usually
Yeah.
95% of the time, don't mind at all. Go ahead, cast anywhere you want,
Yeah.
just not where I'm doing it. So
Yep.
I would say just,
Communication is always important.
I'm sorry.
Communication is always important.
Exactly. The communication's number
And
one. Right.
yeah, and can I actually let me just break in and say, for those who don't know the delta well, when Dave mentions a trough, what he's describing is kind of, it's pretty classic there, in between a riprap bank and a weed line that forms several feet away. There's a trough that may have a couple feet of water to several feet of water depending on the tide, and that's what he's talking about casting to.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, with that, it's just fishing kind of your confidence stuff, but also being able to present the bait enough So if you feel like, hey, I'm good at throwing this speed trap, or I want to throw a square bill and it's a craw color, or maybe it's a shad spawn, you want to throw a white one, right? Behind the boat, if that's what you're comfortable with, and you know you're confident that you won't get that snagged, and you can get it just in enough water column in the strike zone, just enough times, do that because you know
Or you got enough of them and you can retie really
that too.
quickly.
Yeah, exactly. But I certainly
Because you don't want to make your guy come
no.
back for
Yeah,
it.
you certainly don't expect to get snagged. And hey, buddy, do you mind if we just go back? I know it's just a fishing tournament and you only have so much time, but can we go back and grab that? No, I don't. I don't ask for that. If they look back and say you want me to get it, I always say yes, please. If it's if you want to do that, but I don't ask. It's gone, right? Unfortunately, but again, back to the etiquette thing, right? You just want them to fish comfortably. You're there as hopefully a compliment, right? Not a deterrent or a problem. But fish what's confident to you in those situations. If they're moving fast on their trolling motor, sometimes, man, you only have enough room to cast up to the tip of the boat and reel back. But you got to do something. So you'd be surprised, man. You go through the motor and the fish maybe gets a little spooked out of the gets just shaken out of the weed line. You're going past it, and you cast by, and they might eat your little chatterbait, your square bill, whatever it is, drop shot. You throw that drop shot to the pointy end, and blah, 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 blah. It only comes down here. It's not very long, but I've caught fish that way. I'm sure we all have. So that's what I would recommend. It's skinny water, right? You're probably not going to cast in the middle of the slough, just because
Yeah.
it's not the same as like us explaining Clear Lake where you can cast out there. Some places, yeah, if you see grass out there and it's flatter, you'll see what's fishable. But if it's not, and that's really the strike zone, and that's where the fish are, you gotta keep your line wet, and you gotta find a way to just get even three reels in. Whether it's that front of the boat and three reels, stop and go, get it out, do it again. I mean, these fish react sometimes. So
Yeah, yeah, and in those, I can think of a lot of situations where it's like that. With you just get three reels in, like you're saying, or you're pitching a drop shot, really short pitches, and just trying to be, with whatever it is in that scenario, as efficient as possible, making as many casts as you can during the day, as accurately as you can to whatever is in front of you that looks like it might be holding fish. I think generally plays well on the Delta.
yep, exactly. If you see a hole and you're only going to get you got to get it in there. If you think you can't get it in these tiny holes, or you can't get it in the trough, or
Yeah.
you're gonna get caught. Don't do that, because
Yeah.
it's gonna frustrate you probably. But if you think you can do it and you can get away with it, 100%, I think that's a strength. I think that's good. You should again lean on your strengths and what your confidence is.
Yeah.
Lean on your strengths in those conditions and say,
Yeah.
and keep your line in the water. That's it. But
Yeah.
even hey, last
Cool.
thing I'd say about that, don't be
Yeah.
afraid to throw a Senko, Texas rig it, throw it in the back of the boat and let it float, man. I mean, 15, 20 feet behind the boat. It's probably not going to get caught. It's going to run by the weeds. You'll be surprised. That's a good move. And it seems dumb. It seems like one of those dumb things, but you could do that too.
So Dave, that's, I think, a really good start to, all of the stuff we're going to have on the podcast about the Delta. You covered so much ground there that I don't know what we're going to talk about in the next Delta ones, but we'll figure it out. And everybody fishes the place a little bit
They do,
different, so
for sure.
that's one of the nice things about this. So thanks for that. And I'm wondering, maybe let's talk about. So you've got MLF on your shirt. I see a few MLF trophies there behind you. They left the West Coast, and I think both of us can understand why they did, with dwindling numbers out here. It was a really great thing for coanglers for a long time here, with the opportunity to win a boat if you win the tournament. Now we got to travel to Texas or somewhere, at least as far as Texas, if we want to fish in those tournaments. Do you miss MLF? And what are your thoughts about the BAM trail now?
Yeah, definitely miss MLF. That was really my favorite. Shout out to them. They did their best, stay as long as they could, and it's a business. I get it. So no worries there, no hard feelings, and that's business. You got to do what you got to do. So I get that, but I do miss it. It was my favorite circuit by far, to your point, because you get to win a boat as a go, right? And sometimes people, were shocked to hear that. What, you get to win a boat every time? It's like a TOC every time. So you really can't beat that in terms of a prize in my eyes. And then you're really fishing against the best of the best. You are with other circuits too, but this is people from that come from Arizona, that come from Washington State, Oregon, right? You got folks coming from Idaho, right? So you're fishing against obviously SoCal too. Needless to say, but all these guys are going to be
No offense, SoCal.
right. Yeah, NorCal, SoCal. Yeah, no, but it's just I do miss it because of that competitive nature. They had such a good platform. It was just such a well-run circuit, and so yeah, I hope they do come back one day. I love their just the way that they presented the whole circuit and bass fishing and how they represented the sport. So I do miss it, but. Bass Angler Mag. I am gonna fish. This will be my first one. I really after MLF left, I just kind of took a little break, kind of just to reset. But I'm looking forward to jumping into this one. I'm 100% positive about I think the outlook of Bass Angler Magazine. I don't know Mark Lezane, but I fished with him. As a co, he was super helpful, a really nice guy. I know a lot of guys in the industry respect him, so I think that's important because somebody that fishes and runs a tournament circuit is good combination,
For sure.
not just a businessman. That gives me it gives him a lot of credence, and it certainly
Yeah.
he already has that, but I'm just saying that gives me a lot of confidence too that this circuit will be around and it's going to be in good hands. So it's still a business. If he has to do what he's got to do in the future, I trust that Mark will do the right thing and take care of the anglers and put it in the hands of the folks that care about the anglers as well. So I think it's a positive thing. I'm looking forward to fishing
Yeah.
more of those next year, the full circuit. Sadly, I was late to reading the rules this year, and I wanted to fish and try to get into this one, and then fish to hit the 3 and get into the TOC. But you have to fish 3 within your region, so won't be
Yeah.
able to do that. But still looking forward to this, and I think it's going to be a great circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It has to be, for clarity, it has to either be 3 within your region, which is either the West or the Pacific Northwest or whatever that one's called,
right.
or there's a traveler's circuit, which requires 4 tournaments.
That's correct. Yes.
So if, and in your case, you didn't fish Shasta or Don Pedro, so that route wouldn't be viable either.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
But hey, like you
So,
said, I'm in Concord. I'm 20 minutes away from the Delta, so can't pass it up. It's been a while.
yeah.
The itch is there, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mark runs a tight ship. He's a former Marine.
Yep.
I think that helps as well.
Yep.
I've known Mark for a long time. When I started to get into bass fishing again, I hired him as a guide a couple times, and so I've known him since that time. And I think they're doing a great job. And I mentioned to you the one thing that I think has been clearly noticeable is that when something goes wrong, which inevitably it does, running a tournament is a difficult endeavor, and particularly early on, it's always fixed at the next tournament, which doesn't always happen
That's a
in
good
all
point.
of the tournament circuits. So it's like it feels to me like it's just continuously improving every tournament, every season, and I think that bodes well for them for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're doing is going to bode well too, and help the
I hope
coanglings.
so.
Yeah, I know it will, and I think it's really good for that and to help BAM, right? Help other circuits, coanglers to join, and really, I can't say it enough. If you're thinking of fishing a tournament, um, certainly if it's your very first, you might want to jump into a bass club, right, and get your feet wet. And learn some of the basics. But if you're not, and you are a fisherman and you've done tournaments,
Yep.
get into these coangling. It's fun. You learn a lot. You meet people. Matt, I've met you through it, so it's a pleasure, right? And now I'm here talking to you on this podcast. So it's just there's a lot
Yeah.
of possibilities with it, and you can do it. And it's fishing. You guys get out there and join. Let's get the numbers up and let's show MLF that hey, you left a place that maybe you shouldn't have, and look at us now, right? So um,
Yep.
I'm really hopeful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and For sure. And I agree with you about the bass club thing. But I also would add that I don't personally view that that necessarily has to be gating. You know, you don't necessarily have to do that first. Um, I didn't. And, you know, I had a couple, my first two tournaments were, you know, from a fishing and, you know, where I placed perspective were disasters. But the learning curve was like this. And I knew enough to be respectful of, you know, the people I was fishing with. And I was, you know, I think you shouldn't do that if you are not a reasonably good angler, you know, coming
Sure.
into it.
Yeah.
But the bass clubs can help a lot if you've got the time and you're in a place where, you know, you've got one that fits. But also if you're, you know, if you're a reasonably good angler and you pay attention to the
100%.
stuff that's written, or maybe it's on this podcast, or maybe it's on our website in the not too distant future, that teaches you about how to be a co-angler, that can also be a route.
Right.
So something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, the whole, the third time I'll say the etiquette piece, right? That teaches you
Yep.
too. And it just propels your, your interest, I think, in the sport, because you get more welcoming, communication, you get more welcoming pros, and it's keeps you coming back. But and that's part of it too, right? It's just to be aware of that. So you could be a really great fisherman, right? You've done fishing, you maybe never been in a bass club, but that piece there, I think, is really fundamental to fishing these
Yeah.
tournaments.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we've covered most of what I was hoping to cover. I mean, this has been great. Maybe to close, is there anything else on your end that you wanted to convey to potential co-anglers out there? Or, um, you know, most of us co-anglers don't have sponsors. I don't know if you have a sponsor these days. Uh, anything else you want to touch on, or should we go ahead and wrap it up?
No, thank you for that. I just, no sponsors, just, I would say follow this program and feel free. I'm on Instagram, DZ underscore bass fishing, D like Discovery Zone, DZ. And reach out to me if I got a open seat in the back seat, happy to take you fishing. If you have questions, please reach out to me. I think to Matt's platform here, it's great to maybe have a question and answer or feedback forum or something like that. And feel free to
Yeah.
reach out to Matt for anything.
Yeah. Same.
And I'll say it now, Matt's a really great guy, and we've known each other outside of this podcast, and fished, and talked fishing after tournaments quite a bit. And he's a good person and a great resource, and he's creating something really good. And I think I want everybody to just take advantage of it, and let's get the numbers up. Let's get folks fishing. Let's grow the industry even more. And again, just reach out, please, with me. I'm an open book. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to help anybody, any questions you have. Like I said, if there's an open seat, hop on. So I appreciate you
Cool.
having me.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate it. And I will be hopping on in the not too distant future.
This is true.
your open seat. So looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So,
Me too. Well,
thanks for coming on. This is awesome.
thank you for having me. I
And,
really appreciate it, Matt.
Of course. And I look forward to having you on again in the future, the next time.
That would be great. Yeah, me
good
too.
finish. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.
Take care.
Take care, man.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Coangler's Garage podcast with Dave Zavvar. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you're new to Coangler's Garage, here are our goals. First, to give co-anglers a greater voice in the tournament community. Second, to build community amongst co-anglers, both regionally and across the country. And third, to help us all become better tournament anglers by learning from each other. Please take a few moments to like and subscribe to this channel, and come visit us elsewhere on social media. On Instagram and Facebook, you can find us at @Coanglersgarage. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.